So guys, I want to do a couple of videos about AEW, and one of the things I want to talk about is the Trios division. And I do want to say that, Tony Khan, nigga please. Nigga please. There's so many really great Trios teams, and definitely, as I said, that the biggest way that AEW can beat WWE or do well against WWE this next year, going into that 90,000 seat bitch Wembley Stadium, is, sorry, my nose itches, is really just, having, rebuilding their divisions and stuff like that. Because, now they have a lot of tag teams, but they're lacking in a couple of divisions. And one of them is definitely the men's, singles division. That's kind of their big issue. But one of the other divisions they're lacking in is the trios team, and is the trios division. And one of the reasons why is because they're not actually building new stars. They're not actually putting a lot of attention. There's so many good teams that they have. Honestly, you have Shane Taylor Promotions, and a lot of people like Shane Taylor Promotions because they're very, very underrated. And the other part of it is that Shane Taylor is a professional wrestler. He can speak on the microphone, and he can spit that hot fire. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, that I was very embarrassed when I went to Final Battle, because Shane Taylor was the only wrestler on that roster that acted like a professional wrestler. He got on the microphone, he antagonized the crowd. You had Chris Jericho being a fucking punt, really, and being a ditz, really, being his head up his ass type of thing. But you really just had the only person acting like a professional wrestler was Shane Taylor. And then the other part of it is that when you have people like him and stuff like that, you need to, it can do so much, really. And I think there's Lee Moriarty or Tiger Style, whatever his name is, really. He can become a single star in a couple of years. So really, there are people in his, faction that actually could be something. There's also Top Flight and the Infantry. So I'm a little confused about them, really, because I think that they were feuding with each other. There was some back and forth, really, but they've kind of really fucked it up, really. So they have to really unfuck it up, because now we're really, really kind of confused with them. But I know, with Top Flight, and the Infantry, they had some appeal. They had some appeal, really, but they've kind of disorganized them so much, really. And I think that they were feuding with each other, or one was joining another team. But there was something there. There could have been future stars. There could have been future single stars. You could have done something with that. And then also, too, you had the Von Erichs, and definitely one of the worst trios team of all time. And I blame 100% this on Tony Khan, because they were a champion. They were the trios Ring of Honor champion for over the year, and they never had any defenses, really. That's not good. That's like when Dean Ambrose was in WWE, and he was a champ. He was the U.S. champion for over a year. Or how Mercedes Moné, we don't know how many times she's defending the 9 or 10 belts she's holding, really. So that's not a good champion, but there is so much potential. The Pride of Texas. They can find another member, or they can find somebody who's a little lost on the roster, make a trios team, or they could have had Dustin and they could have just defended. They could have done a lot of matches. There's so much that they can do, really. So it's almost again, you don't take wrestlers for the Von Erichs, and I believe they're from MLW and other wrestling promotions. You don't give them titles from AEW, and then you're okay, we're not even going to have you defend the titles for even over a year or whatever, really. But definitely the Von Erichs. The Von Erichs is a really big name. There's so much that they can do, really. So, if you make them a trios team, you put them on Collision, people love that. You're going to Texas in a couple of weeks, to Houston, those other areas. And Texas is a draw that drew close to 30,000 people at the stadium, really. There's so much that they can do. Have somebody kidnap Kerry Von Erich. Kidnap, the Von Erich dad, really. I believe it's Kerry Von Erich, if I'm correct, really. Kevin Von Erich. Have somebody kidnap Kevin Von Erich, cover him up with blood and stuff like that, and have the Von Erich boys get that old Texas revenge, really. Take out a cow prod and hit Shane Taylor in the ass with it. There's so many things that they can do, really. So you have a team there. The other one is that you have MXN Collection, and they're a very metrosexual team. So definitely, like I said before, it is controversial, but the rule is metrosexual is controversial because it's people acting gay and effeminate, whether they're not actually gay or effeminate. And if you're really into that culture and that's who you are, that's one thing. But you have to be careful that you're not black facing as a gay person, because that's when, or cultural appropriating to a point where you're oh, well, I'm going to be all gay stereotypes and whatever, really. but there is an appeal to them. They do have a look. A lot of people were talking about their segment this weekend, so it's almost like, why don't you do something? Why don't they go after the trios title? You also have Dalton Castle and the Outrunners. That Dalton Castle is a draw. A lot of people like that. Again, the metrosexual, Zoolander, New Orleans style, The Boys, and everything like that, really. So it's almost like, why can't you build that? If that is such a draw, if his personality, really, why can't you fucking build that into something, really? Because people like to see that. I actually think you can even give them the tag team titles and make them a trios team. The next thing that I would say is they're not together, but you can say the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn, or the Acclaimed and Jerry Lynn, because I think Jerry Lynn wants to wrestle and get rough, really. It's really hinting that they could become a trios team, but with Jerry Lynn this time. But that could be something as well. Like, the Acclaimed is a draw. The Max Caster raps, there's money in that. The next thing that you can do is Samoa Joe and the Ops, really, because, again, they don't have a lot of rivals that can take them on, really. But here's an entire division. You have Samoa Joe, really. So anybody who pins Samoa Joe, like if you have Lee Moriarty, or if you have Dalton Castle, or you have, like, Claudio Castagnoli in the Death Riders, or somebody else, really, that's good, because it says, hey, you know what? Somebody, or Sammy Guevara, hey, somebody may be ready to be an AEW champion. It helps them out, really. You have Powerhouse Hobbs, and you can even do matches where you can even do jobbers or whatever, where it's like three people on one Hobbs, really, and then Hobbs beats them, then you build Hobbs into a champion, really. So there's something in that. The next thing that you have is the Don Callis family, and this is really shitty for them, really, because they have like 10 people, really. So why are they not going after the trios title? You can have the lower echelon and the upper echelon. You can do something like with Hechicero, Rocky Romero, Lance Archer. You can combine, Takeshita or Okada or Wardlow or Kyle Fletcher, or Takeshita and Kyle Fletcher and somebody else, really, because you can be like, okay, well, we can have double duty champions, because sometimes in professional wrestling, that's good to show how good a wrestler is by making them do double duty. But the thing about it is, why doesn't Don Callis have a couple of his members going after those titles, really? Because wouldn't that make a lot of sense, really? Because if you have so many people, you want to win titles, why not? The other team I want to talk about is Ricochet, the Demand, really. Again, isn't his goal really to gain, titles? So why not the trios title? The Gates of Agony, they've been on the roster for a couple of years. A lot of people say they suck. A lot of people think that they shouldn't be there. They're like, you know what, this is my place. We own our place. We're going to do shit. So you have that as well, really. You also have LFI, a very good people in the group, very directionless. Should they say something like, hey, we matter. Hey, we've been overlooked. Hey, you know what? We had Jake the Snake Roberts. It didn't work out. Hey, we had Chris Jericho with Sammy Guevara. It didn't work out. Hey, we've been used and abused by veterans. We want to take over this company. We want this, really. You have Mama Wayne, Nick Wayne, and Kip Sabian. They can find another member, make it a trios thing. You have FTR and Stokely. You can make that something. You have Christian Cage, Edge. You can find somebody else for their group. You can have the Death Riders. It makes a lot of sense. You have, you have Wheeler Yuta, John Moxley, Claudio, Pac. So why don't you do something where three of them, or you say Freebird role? They all hold the title, but only one person in that. But it's like 4 or 5 person group. But then you throw somebody else in there to help out, really. So there's something in that as well, really. You can have a CMLL division. You got Mascara Dorada. You can have Bandito. And then you can have, Big Puma or another wrestler as well, really. So, I think that's another just, thing to do, really. So there's definitely a lot that they can accomplish with the trios division. There's Hurt Syndicate. We hurt people. We hurt people. We hurt people. You could lead to that match of Bobby motherfucking Lashley versus Powerhouse motherfucking Hobbs, really. Or Samoa motherfucking Joe versus Bobby motherfucking Lashley. Or Claudio Castagnoli versus Bobby motherfucking Lashley. Or Claudio Castagnoli versus Powerhouse motherfucking Hobbs. Or Claudio Castagnoli versus Samoa motherfucking Joe, really. All these things can do great things, really. So it's like, you have a great trios division, but you ultimately need to have the bookers. And like I said before, and I'll say it again, the biggest heel in AEW right now is the booking and the writers' room. There's so many great trios teams. Why not use Wrestle Dream to just like say, hey, maybe we can have a trios ladder match, or hey, maybe we can have like a tournament for the trios title at Full Gear. Hey, why don't we have like a 4-way trios match? There's so many things that they can do, really. Or even you have a Shane Taylor say, hey, we're going to defend the titles at Wrestle Dream. We want to stand out. Shane Taylor's taken over. Like he said to me, you know what, called me underrated. But when people think we're underrated, that's when we strike, and they're not going to see it. You have like, the trios title, which may not be defended. They can do a tournament, or they can say something like, hey, you know what, we're going to do like, we're going to do like a couple of matches. We're going to have the trios people talk a little bit. And then at Full Gear, we're going to have like, maybe the Hurt Syndicate versus the Ops. Or, you can have like, Dalton Castle and the boys or whatever, really. Dalton Castle and the Outrunners. But what I would do is I would do a tournament, and then what you do is you get to the trios division. You get to the trios match at Full Gear. It's the Ops versus the Hurt Syndicate, Powerhouse Hobbs, Bobby Lashley. You tease that match, and then you get that to Wembley, and you put that at Wembley Stadium, because that'll be a good generation versus generation. They need to go that way. But like I've said before, and I'll say it again, that the trios division has a lot of potential. It could be a really great division, but hopefully they just wake the fuck up and realize what they got, really. Because if they don't, then fuck them for that. Because there's so many great wrestlers, there's so many great talents in that. You need to make every title matter. You don't do that thing like you give Mercedes 10 belts, you don't give Okada 3 belts. You have to make shit matter, really. So let's hope that they get their heads out of their asses and they fix that division, because there's so many great potential, especially Dalton Castle. Yeah, I love me Dalton Castle and Bobby motherfucking Lashley. The greatest black man that ever lived since Swerve Strickland and Rick James and Dave Chappelle.